folks, Lauren Fairweather here, and today I'm going to be journaling my reread of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, chapters 3 and 4. I really loved the response you took the time to write in the comments of the first episode, and so I was extra excited to make another for all of you. These chapters are where the series starts to get especially magical for me, so I was definitely looking forward to revisiting them. And even though I had a pretty clear picture of what happened in them, there were still some things that jumped out at me that I wanted to discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. So one of my goals with this particular spread was to have kind of a planned layout and also use a bit more color. So what I did was I started with one of these pieces of cardstock that I've had around for a while. I use little pieces of it here and there, and I cut out a piece of it that's exactly the same size as one of the pages in this notebook. Then, using a ruler and just kind of eyeballing it, I made a tear so that I could have this cardstock in the top left and the bottom right corners of the layout, and it would kind of frame the whole thing. And what I learned from doing this is that using a ruler really helps because I could get a straight line, but I found that I got an even messier look to the tear when I tore really close to the edge as opposed to in the middle of the paper like I did at first. It didn't really look messy enough to me. And then I kind of flipped over each corner and cut around the curved part of the page just so that it would line up perfectly. So here we are at Chapter 3, Letters from No One, and if you've read the Harry Potter series before, you know exactly what that means. And so I wanted to start off by actually making the art that I wanted to put on this page, just so I could make sure that I had the space for it, and then I figured that I would fill in all of the text and my notes later. So in order to fill this page up with tiny Hogwarts letters, I took this parchment patterned cardstock that I've had around since my wedding. I bought way more of it than I needed, and so I've been using it on all kinds of projects ever since. So then I cut out a bunch of little, what I can only describe as house shapes. So there's a rectangle at the bottom and a triangle at the top. And when you fold the triangle down on top of the rest of it, it looks like a tiny little envelope. And so I secured that part of it down by using one little glue dot as opposed to gluing the whole thing down because I wanted it to have some dimension, and I thought that that gave me the effect that I wanted. Then I wanted to make one larger envelope that actually has the first address that you see when Harry starts receiving his letters, and so it was just a regular rectangle shape because it's just the front of the envelope. And I wrote the address, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. And I did not put a stamp on it because Harry specifically notices that there's no stamp when it arrives. I also used that same pen to add a little mini circle where the wax seal would be. I've been kind of wanting to buy a wax seal just because of Harry Potter, but maybe someday. Once I arranged all of the envelopes where I wanted them to go, I glued them down using a Scotch tape runner, and then I could get started writing my notes about the chapter. So this one starts out with Harry being excited to go to public school in September, and that is because Dudley is not going with him. It's very exciting for him. Up until now, he's been going to school with Dudley, and so most of his days at school have been spent escaping Dudley, unfortunately, and his friends. And so I think Harry's excited to get a little bit of freedom from his family. There's this quick little moment with Mrs. Fig where we find out that she broke her leg in the last chapter, tripping over one of her cats. Because she has a lot of them. The thing about Mrs. Fig is that I never really noticed or paid any attention to her, and then later we found out that, oh, by the way, spoilers, if you haven't read the rest of this series, I talk about the larger effect of a lot of the things we're seeing in these chapters of things that happen later. So if you are still avoiding Harry Potter spoilers, maybe watch something different. But now that we know that Mrs. Fig is a squib who was placed there by Dumbledore to keep an eye on Harry all of these years, she's just living next door with her cats, babysitting Harry whenever the Dursleys need her to, and I've been wanting to pay a little bit more attention to her on this reread just because of that. The chapter really gets going when the first letter arrives. This is a very big moment. It's the first time that Harry has ever received mail, ever. Even boring mail. He mentions that he never even receives that. So he is so excited. And this obviously sets off a huge chain of events. And so the first thing that happens is that the Dursleys realize that they're being watched, and they move Harry out of the cupboard into Dudley's second bedroom. Harry specifically says, the quote is, "Yesterday he'd have given anything to be up here. Today, he'd rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. Obviously, it's confiscated immediately. He doesn't have a chance to read it. He's kind of kicking himself at the idea that he didn't just keep quiet and hide it from his family. He made a big deal out of it, and they noticed, and they took it away. And so now he's upset about that. So Harry comes up with this plan to wake up before any of the rest of his family, sneak downstairs, and go outside onto the corner so that he can stop the mail delivery person before the letter even reaches his house. Unfortunately, he discovers pretty quickly that Vernon had slept by the door in order to guard the letter slot, and Harry steps on his face by accident. So there are a lot of really fun little moments now where the wizards are trying to be really clever about the way that they deliver these letters, hoping that something will get to Harry. And the one that I had forgotten about that I wish they'd included in the movies, because this would have been so funny to see, they get 24 eggs delivered, and Petunia goes to crack them, and there is a tiny letter hidden inside each one of 24 eggs. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it so much. So once there are just too many letters getting into the house, Vernon decides this is not a place that we need to be, and he packs up the family, and they take a very roundabout road trip to a gloomy-looking hotel. And almost right away, over 100 letters are delivered to the lobby in Harry's name, and so the person from the hotel knocks on the door to let him know that they have them, and they need to move again, obviously. So the third move of the chapter is Vernon bringing them to this dock where they borrow a rowboat and end up going into the middle of the ocean during a huge storm. They end up on this huge rock with a terrible shack on it, but he figures that this is a place where no one would ever follow him, and they must be safe now. This is the night where Harry realizes that it is almost his 11th birthday. He ends up counting down to midnight, and he's kind of thinking to himself that he's not really excited about it. I mean, he doesn't get parties or presents or anything like that, but I put down this little quote, "Still, you weren't 11 every day." And then, of course, there's a booming knock on the door, and that is where the chapter ends. For chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys, I decided that I wanted to do a little bit of artwork first. There were two images in this chapter that I wanted to pay particular attention to, and that is Hagrid's pink umbrella and Harry's birthday cake. I sketched out the pink umbrella with pencil first on pink cardstock, and then once I was happy with it, I cut out around it with a little bit of a border, and then I inked it using a Tombow brush pen. And then I made Harry's birthday cake, and I decided to make it look like it's described in the books, not the way we see it in the movies. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when I get into my notes for the chapter, but that's how that turned out. So I figured out where I wanted them to be placed, and I glued them down with that same Scotch tape runner, and then I can get into talking about the chapter. So Hagrid arrives at this awful little shack in the middle of a storm, terrifies the Dursleys, and pulls Harry's cake out of his pocket. Now, there are a lot of differences between the cake that we see in the movies and the cake that we see in the books, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. First of all, it's a chocolate cake, and it has the words written in green icing. It does not say that it's pink. I assume that they changed it to pink in the movie just so you could read the words better. But the thing that definitely confused me a little bit is that it's spelled correctly in the book, which I find interesting. I paid extra attention to the spelling and the way that Hagrid's speech is presented. So at least in this chapter, every time that Hagrid writes something, it's spelled correctly. Later in the chapter, Hagrid writes a letter to Dumbledore to let him know that he found Harry and everything's okay, and that is spelled correctly. But his speech itself is spelled phonetically. He also says that he won't spell Voldemort for Harry because he doesn't know how to spell it. So that says several things to me. That says that J.K. Rowling made the decision, or maybe her editor made the decision, to have all of the things that are written down spelled correctly just so people can read them a little bit easier. But then I wonder why they made the decision to change his speech to be spelled in a certain way. We learn in this chapter that he didn't finish his education because he was expelled, but is this why we're supposed to just assume that he's not great with spelling? Which then led me to write my cheeky little note here. They learn spells, but do they learn spelling at Hogwarts? I do not know. If you have thoughts on these things or anything else that I mentioned in this video, I would love to read them in the comments below. I love the idea of getting to have discussions about these books, even though a lot of us have read them many times. I find that there are always new things to find and discover and think about, so if you'd like to join me in this process, that would make me super happy. Moving on, Hagrid is super upset to learn that the Dursleys never taught Harry anything about his world or his parents. It becomes clear to Vernon that Hagrid is about to tell him, and he forbids him from doing that, but Hagrid does it anyway. So I started writing out the quote that is very famous and also different in the movies, but I screwed it up. So in order to cover up my mistake, I ended up drawing the 3 chapter stars that are in the American Harry Potter books, and then I lettered out the quote, "Harry, you're a wizard." Hagrid points out something really interesting about the Dursleys' refusal to involve Harry in his own life. Harry didn't even know his own story when every kid in the wizarding world knows his name, and that just blows Hagrid's mind. He can't imagine, when everybody's been worried about him all this time, that Harry had no clue that everyone cared so much. He just was completely isolated from it. But I think that's what Dumbledore wanted in the first place. So I guess we'll just never know if Harry had known all these things, if it would have impacted him differently. What do you think? Do you think Harry would be different if he grew up knowing that he was famous and that he was a wizard? So Harry finally gets to hear what's in the letter. He's been waiting for days, and Hagrid reads it to him. He has 2 responses to this, and I wrote both of them down because I found that they were interesting, and they also were not really what I remembered them being. His first reaction is that questions exploded inside his head like fireworks. He's just overwhelmed, and he doesn't know what to ask first. Then I took a moment to write down a little detail that jumped out at me, which is that Hagrid pulls an owl out of his pocket during this chapter. Just that poor owl. The other reaction that he has, Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. This makes a lot of sense because Harry's entire life has been pretty awful. He doesn't know anything outside of the cycle of abuse that he's been living in. He's treated horribly. He doesn't have any friends or family who care about him. And he's just stuck in this loop, and he just doesn't. The thing he's most excited about is getting to go to public school that everyone keeps telling him will be horrible just because he knows that he can do it away from his bullies. And that's kind of awful. So I am excited to get to relive this experience with Harry, and obviously this is huge news for him, and he has so much to look forward to and so many new things to see. So I hope that you will come along the ride with me. This, I think, is, well, I mean, it's only the second one, but I'm really happy with the way that these journaling pages turned out. I really like the little letters, and the corners turned out kind of cool. There was a lot to write, so I didn't do a whole lot of visual stuff other than the lettering itself. But I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like for me to continue working on this, and if you have any thoughts or requests going forward. Since I am kind of keeping this in bullet journal style, this is a Artist Loft bullet journal. It's dot grid pages, kind of typically used for bullet journaling. I added page numbers and then flipped back to the index that's included in this notebook, kind of a cool little feature. That way I can find specific chapters later if I need to. As always, I'm going to put information about all of the products I used in the video description below in case you are curious, and a bunch of people last time told me that they were inspired to start doing this too. So if you are also journaling the books that you're reading, take pictures of them and post them on social media and tag me at LaurenFairWX so I can see how they're turning out. I will link to the playlist that I've made of these journaling reread episodes in case you've missed any past episodes. And if you enjoyed this, I would love it so much if you would share it with your friends and anyone you know who might enjoy it. If you're new here, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe so that you can stick around. Make sure you turn on the notification bell so that you'll definitely know when I've posted something new. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.